All my life I've observed how people remain hidden from themselves. We cloak ourselves in layers, social masks, elegant words, even artificial spirituality. But the truth, dear listener, rarely shows itself in what is obvious. To truly know someone, listening is not enough, you have to watch them. We live in a time where image is everything, a well-edited photo, a carefully chosen phrase, a rehearsed smile. Society has replaced being with appearing, and so we connect not with real people, but with ghosts, edited versions, idealized projections that often can't withstand the slightest brush with reality. Maybe you've noticed it yourself. Some people seem charming, patient, kind, until you disagree with them or someone useless crosses their path. Then, in an instant, the mask slips. Sympathy turns to sarcasm. What looked like understanding becomes coldness. Why? Because the soul speaks the loudest when it feels threatened. It's not peace that reveals a person's character, but the fire of conflict and the quiet of anonymity. If you want to see a person's heart, don't just listen to what they say, not even how they treat you when things are going well. Watch them when their ego is hurt. Observe them in silence when there's nothing to gain. That, only that, is where the truth appears. But before we go deeper, let me tell you why these two seemingly simple situations are so revealing. It's no coincidence. Both carry something deep, something unconscious that speaks. And that's exactly what we'll explore together. Most people try to appear virtuous, wise, or kind, but the truth of the soul does not show itself in calmness. It appears in friction, at the edge, in disappointment. There are two moments when the mask drops and the shadow speaks. When we're contradicted, and when we deal with someone who has nothing to offer us. These aren't just social tests. They are open windows into the unconscious. Why? Because the self we've constructed, this polished, decorated identity we present to the world, is not equipped to deal with frustration or irrelevance. When someone contradicts us, they challenge the image we have of ourselves. They force us to face the possibility of being wrong, of losing control. And when we encounter someone who offers no flattery, no benefit, that's when our capacity or incapacity for unconditional regard is revealed. From the perspective of depth psychology, these two situations activate very primitive aspects of the psyche. In the face of contradiction, it's not reason that responds, it's the wounded ego, the inner structure that clings to being right as a form of psychic survival. And when confronted with someone socially irrelevant, the unconscious evaluates their worth through learned filters: power, beauty, usefulness. Those who have integrated their shadow treat even those who can give them nothing with respect. But those who live from a need for validation or superiority will look down on anything that offers no reward. Wherever there is discomfort, there is truth, because discomfort strips away the mask and forces us to react from our true self. Watching how someone responds to contradiction is not about politeness or emotional intelligence. It is a revelation of who they really are. It is a revealing act of consciousness, of inner maturity, and of the work, or lack thereof, done with one's own shadow. Just as telling is how someone treats the invisible, the humble, the one who offers them nothing in return. It's like a glimpse into their bare soul. Because in that space, there's no need to perform, no audience to impress, no praise to be earned, only truth remains. I invite you to look more closely in your everyday life, not to judge others, but to learn. To recognize those automatic reactions in yourself, those shadows that rise to the surface. When things don't go the way you expected, remember, what disturbs you in another is often a mirror of something you don't want to face in yourself. And now let me take you even deeper. Let's begin with the first great mirror of the soul, the reaction to contradiction. When someone disagrees with you, it's not just your argument that is being tested. It's your entire internal framework, your ability to live with losing control, with otherness, with the possibility of being wrong. In contradiction, the ego feels attacked. It doesn't matter how rational or composed someone seems. When their worldview is challenged, their true inner structure is revealed. Some respond with anger, others shut down, change the subject, resort to sarcasm, or try to force their view with a strained smile or covert aggression. And then there are those who pause, listen, breathe deeply before responding, who even value the difference. These people are not weak or indecisive, they are strong, because they've worked with their shadow enough to no longer need to always be right. The need to be right is an emotional addiction of the ego. It gives us a sense of safety, importance, and superiority. But when that need dominates our relationships, it's not wisdom that emerges, it's fear. In my work as a psychiatrist, I've seen how the wounded ego has caused irreparable rifts, inner battles, and long, cold silences between people who once loved each other. Often it all began with a simple disagreement, a difference of opinion that, instead of being seen as a normal part of human interaction, was felt as a personal threat. When someone cannot tolerate correction, they're not defending truth. They're defending a self-image that refuses to be questioned. And that is, through a Jungian lens, the shadow in action. The shadow doesn't always scream. Sometimes it hides behind pride, subtle arrogance, or even a quiet calm that masks silent contempt. And you? How do you react when someone contradicts you? Do you feel anger, the urge to convince, pain, frustration? Or can you see the difference as an opportunity to view the world from another angle? Inner work begins right there, in noticing our emotions when the world refuses to bend to our beliefs. Because contradiction is not the enemy, it's a doorway. And only those who've made peace with their shadow can walk through it without getting lost in resentment or the need to feel superior. But it's not just the ego that shows up here. Sometimes it's the wounded inner child, once silenced or humiliated, now unable to tolerate even a hint of rejection. Contradiction can stir deep memories, old rejections, old wounds. That's why it hurts so much. But that pain can also be a path to self-awareness. Wherever you react without knowing why, that's where the journey inward begins. And just as the reaction to contradiction reveals us, so does a second, subtler but equally telling scenario: how we treat those who have nothing to offer us. In the next step, we'll dive deeper into the human soul. A person's true greatness isn't revealed in how they treat the powerful or how polite they are to those they admire. It's revealed in the quietest moments, in how they treat those who have nothing to offer them in return. No status, no gain, no praise. Many people consider themselves kind because they are friendly to friends, attentive to superiors, generous with those who can give something back. But the true test of the soul happens in the presence of the invisible. That elderly woman moving slowly in the supermarket line. The young man cleaning public restrooms. The delivery worker who brings a package without even being looked at. There, in those seemingly insignificant moments, something profound is revealed. The relationship with the useless disables the ego's reward systems, and in that space, the truth emerges. Genuine respect or hidden contempt. Someone who is kind only when there's something to gain is not kind. They're just an emotional businessman, and I've seen it countless times. People who appear loving and compassionate in public, who speak the language of respect, inclusion, and humility, But when they think no one is watching, they look down on the cleaner, ignore the one who speaks differently, lose patience with the weak. This duality, this contrast between what is shown and what is real, is a wound in the collective soul. From a depth psychological perspective, this behavior is a projection of the shadow. The useless other disturbs us because they reflect parts of ourselves we don't want to see. Our vulnerability, our powerlessness, our smallness. That's why we react with coldness, impatience, or indifference. But the one who has walked the inner path, who has accepted their own shadow, sees even in the simplest person a reflection of their own humanity. They don't need admiration, nor do they cling to hierarchies. They know that we all, without exception, share the same essence. The mature soul does not judge others by what they have, but by who they are. And even then, it recognizes that this being is a mystery that we are not entitled to measure. This is why the way we treat those who can offer us nothing may be the purest expression of our level of consciousness, because when there are no spectators, no benefits, no power at play, only the bare heart remains. Have you ever watched yourself in such moments? Have you caught yourself being impatient, cold, or indifferent to someone you considered to have no value? If so, do not condemn yourself, just observe it. Acknowledge the shadow that appears. Because only when we look at it without judgment can we begin to transform it. There is nothing more powerful than silent love, the kind that expects nothing, asks for no recognition, and acts solely out of compassion. And now, if you're ready, we'll take one step further. What is this shadow that shows itself when we're contradicted or when we ignore others? That's what we'll explore next. Everything we refuse to acknowledge within ourselves, everything we suppress, deny, or feel ashamed of, does not disappear. It hides deep within our psyche. That is what I call the shadow. The shadow is not evil by nature. It is not some inner demon, but a legitimate part of the soul that has been excluded from conscious dialogue. These are emotions, impulses, desires, fears, traumas, and memories that were once deemed unacceptable by others or by ourselves. And so we buried them. But what is repressed does not die. It transforms. It waits. And precisely in moments of pressure, like being contradicted or interacting with someone we consider insignificant, the shadow finds its chance to surface. Why? Because in those moments, the mask of the ego begins to crack, and what was hidden behind it starts to emerge. The shadow appears when we lose control, when we can no longer manage the image we project outward. And in that moment, often with pain or surprise, we begin to see who we really are. Disproportionate anger over a different opinion, subtle disdain for a humble person, impatience with the vulnerable, these do not come from nowhere. They have deep roots. Sometimes it's the inner child who was never heard, or the humiliated teenager. Sometimes it's the voice of the critical father still echoing within, or the wound of inferiority that has morphed into arrogance as a way to survive. The shadow doesn't act alone. It has allies within us: quick judgment, the need for superiority, the urge to control, and the difficulty of accepting difference. If we don't consciously observe these inner mechanisms, they control our reactions without us even realizing it. And so we become victims of ourselves, believing we are acting out of reason, while in truth we are reacting from old, unhealed wounds. The shadow is like a mirror, showing us what we struggle most to accept, that we don't fully know ourselves. But not everything is darkness. Once the shadow is integrated, it becomes a source of power, depth, and empathy. A person who has faced their shadow no longer needs to destroy others to feel strong. They no longer need to dominate in order to feel worthy. and they no longer despise others because they've made peace with their own inner complexity. That is the true strength of self-awareness, not being perfect, but being whole. Only what is accepted can be transformed, and only what is seen stops ruling us from the shadows. So, if you truly want to know someone, including yourself, don't just look for the light they project. Also look at their shadow and learn to observe your own with the same compassion. In the next part, we'll dive into a common but often misunderstood phenomenon: false harmony and the danger of the external facade, a space where the shadow disguises itself as virtue. Many people believe they are at peace simply because they've silenced conflict. They think they are kind because they never truly say what they feel, and they consider themselves conscious because they've learned to speak as if they were. But harmony that is forced from the outside without inner integration is just a mask, a performance, an illusion. We live in a time obsessed with image, not just physical image, but emotional, spiritual, and psychological image. Being positive, appearing enlightened, acting balanced, this has become the new social expectation. And in our constant effort to seem good, we lose contact with what is authentic. Who hasn't met someone who seems flawless? Who speaks calmly, always smiles, avoids confrontation, and appears untouched by emotional chaos? Yet the moment there's resistance or friction, they become distant, cold, passive-aggressive. That is false harmony. That is the shadow dressed up as virtue. Even the shadow knows how to wear light. It can use beautiful words, perform noble gestures, even invoke spirituality to keep what's repressed hidden. Don't confuse peace with suppression. What looks like calm is often just forced silence over emotions we never learn to process. And what we call tolerance is often just fear of confrontation. The authentic soul doesn't need to appear perfect. It allows itself to be human. From a Jungian perspective, this is essential, because the path of individuation, the journey to who you truly are, is not about becoming lighter, but about becoming aware of both your light and your darkness. That includes embracing your anger, your envy, your inner contradictions, your unhealed wounds, not to remain trapped in them, but to integrate them. Everything we deny controls us, but everything we accept transforms us. False harmony is dangerous, not because it's evil, but because it prevents our growth. It lulls us to sleep inside an idealized self-image. And when life confronts us, when a real situation forces us to step out of that role, we fall apart. And then the long-ignored shadow emerges with anger, coldness, and judgment. And even we are surprised by ourselves. Has it never happened to you that you reacted in a way you didn't understand? That you said something cruel without meaning to? That you looked down on someone without even noticing? That didn't come from your true essence. It came from your shadow, tired of being ignored. Those who live to be seen cannot truly see others. They can only manipulate them to maintain their role. That's why it is essential that we stop striving for superficial perfection and begin to cultivate authenticity. Because a real emotion, even if uncomfortable, is worth more than 1,000 empty gestures. And a sincere look, even if it reveals vulnerability, holds more power than 1,000 beautiful words. In the next part of our journey, we'll explore something profoundly necessary: observing without judgment. It is an inner practice that not only transforms our relationships, but also opens the door to genuine compassion. To observe without judging is one of the purest forms of wisdom, but also one of the most difficult, because our minds, trained since childhood to classify, compare, and protect themselves, have forgotten how to simply see. Judging automatically is an ancient defense mechanism. When something bothers us, we judge it. When someone hurts us, we label them. When we don't understand something, we reject it. But in doing so, we don't just distance ourselves from others, we distance ourselves from our own truth. In judgment-free observation lies a quiet power. It's not about justifying everything or becoming indifferent. It's about seeing with the eyes of the soul, not through the weapons of the ego. Because every person who triggers you reveals an unresolved part within you. Every gesture that annoys you reflects something you have yet to integrate. What irritates you in another is almost always a mirror of what you refuse to face in yourself. And if you can observe someone reacting poorly, contradicting themselves, projecting their shadow, and instead of judging, you ask, what pain is behind this reaction? What untold story sustains this behavior, and why does it affect me so deeply? Then you are entering a deeper level of awareness. Observing without judgment is not passivity, it is active presence. It means choosing understanding over condemnation. And that doesn't just apply to others, it applies above all to yourself. How often have you judged yourself for feeling anger, jealousy, or sadness? How often have you demanded emotional perfection from yourself and denied your inner rhythms in the process? Constant self-judgment doesn't make you stronger, it makes you rigid, and that rigidity blocks your growth. The soul opens in the space of permission. Only when you stop condemning yourself can you begin to truly understand yourself. This principle is foundational in depth psychology. Conscious self-observation is the first step toward transformation. But if you observe yourself with judgment, you only reinforce what you already believe. If instead you observe yourself with curiosity and compassion, you begin to uncover what has long been hidden. This way of seeing changes our relationships. Because when you stop viewing others as wrong or toxic, and begin to see them as people in process, as wounded beings, as someone in an inner struggle, you free yourself from the need to control or punish them. You can then choose how to respond, consciously and without resentment. Observing without judgment doesn't mean accepting everything. It means consciously choosing how you respond, not from automatic reaction, but from awareness. In that inner space, true freedom is born, the freedom to be yourself with both your light and your shadow, and the freedom to allow others to be themselves without letting that threaten your inner peace. Now that you understand this, you are ready for the final step of this journey, an invitation to see the world and yourself with new eyes, with the eyes of the soul, through the practice of conscious presence.